ASEAN Breakfast Call Dialogue, widening your horizons. Hey, this is Arlene.
Hi, this is Gowri.
Hi, this is Grace.
And we are at our third segment of today on our ABC Dialogue. Today we are going to talk about inequality, and we are with the author of the Colors of Inequality, Dr. Muhammed. Abdul Khalid. Hi.
Hello, how are you?
Hello.
Dr. Muhammad, you wrote this book, The Colors of Inequality, which focuses on wealth distribution as well as income inequality and household gap in Malaysia. Why you started out this research on this particular subject?
Why focus on this subject? I think it always interests me. Maybe it comes naturally, I think. Some people are attracted to other things. I'm attracted to the issue of inequality, and this book actually is part of my dissertation thesis that I worked on while I was doing my PhD. So I updated some numbers, updated some data. Why focus on inequality? Because there's a cost to it if you don't pay attention. There's economic cost. IMF even did a study recently. Those countries with high inequality, usually we have lower growth. That's one. Number two, those countries with high inequality during economic downturn, usually they come out from recession much later, which means the cost is much higher. There's also health costs. There's a study by these two professors from UK. Those unequal country, the citizen usually shorter, fatter, die younger, and have more diseases.
I like the fatter part, actually.
I mean, which means you're unhealthy because you're poor. You
Actually, that's very serious.
Yeah. You cannot have good food, not good nutritious intake. Problem, health. And third, is more pertinent to us, more relevant to Malaysia, is that it creates social and political instability, particularly for countries that are not homogeneous. Maybe like in Grace or Korea, it's not big an issue. While it's an issue, it's not big an issue because it's a homogeneous society. When you have a non-homogeneous society, the inequality would have big repercussions.
Of course.
What we have seen in 1969 here, what we have seen in Sri Lanka, Yugoslavia, even in America, you look in Ferguson, now in New York, and they say now this is because of inequality. When you have inequality in economic structure, inequality in income, it will also translate in inequality in political power, inequality in decision making, which would have impact to society.
If you look at the bigger picture in Southeast Asia, inequality is a major problem in most of the 10 countries, including Singapore and Malaysia. But inequality has seldom been part of the core ideology of the policy making in Malaysian government until recently, when it becomes something that is of a concern. Why is that so?
Okay, maybe that's the perception, but not entirely correct. If you look at the economic development of Malaysia since we got Merdeka until 1970, we never talk about distribution. We never talk about inequality, although inequality is very wide then. Colonial legacy, like I mentioned in the book, we practice laissez-faire policy, and because of this, you see there's a tension between groups, between urban and rural, between ethnic groups. Therefore, since then, Malaysia practice growth with equity strategy, which means NEP. You eradicate poverty and you restructure society. Inequality has been the cornerstone of Malaysian economic policy since 1970 until about the early 2000, 2003, 2004, or even after financial crisis, we tend to relax that a bit. But it's been always a cornerstone of economic policy. Even you look at new economic model, 3 prongs, right? High income, sustainability, and number 3 is inclusiveness. So I think but less attention being paid to inclusiveness, more on high income.
Yeah, that's where your book comes in, which is quite interesting because when you analyze it, you still analyze it based on the different racial community in Malaysia, how much they fare among each other in terms of different mechanism in terms of income distribution, wealth distribution, and so on and so forth. Why race is a factor in inequality in this country?
Because that's what we've been talking about, right? Between Malay, Chinese, Malay, Indian, Indian, Chinese. We cannot hide it. And why I want to study this, I want to find out, is there really a big gap? Yes, there's a gap. But you look at median, everybody is on the same boat. The latest number, you look at median wage. Median wage monthly of a Malay Bumiputra worker is 1,006. Of Indian is 1,005, of Chinese is 2,000, which means 50% of Chinese earn below 2,000, 50% Malay Bumi earn below 1,007, 50% of Indian earns below 1,005. It's they're in the same boat. Only when you come to the rich part, then there's a gap. If you look at the overall inequality, the biggest gap, people always thought the biggest gap is among the Bumi. It's not true. The biggest gap in Gini ratio is among the Indians.
I see.
If you take in terms of nominal, in terms of money, berapa ringgit the average Chinese has and what's top the rich Chinese has, the gap is the widest among the Chinese. But people always thought that the gap.
So are you saying that if I put it in a layman's term, the richest Chinese and the poorest Chinese are actually wider than the richest Malay and compared to the poorer Malay?
Yes. So the issue of inequality is not only a race issue.
The intra-race also put a dimension
yes,
to it.
Within is also a big problem. So it's these two dimension we need to pay close attention.
So the question I want to ask you, why there's a huge gap between the very rich, probably the top 1% of this society, compared to the 99%?
I'm not sure about 99.
I'm just using the Occupy.
But it looks like the sort of like the cycle has created in the rich society and then the poorer community that they can't get out of this sort of red cycle they've created.
Then we talk about mobility, right?
Social mobility.
Social mobility. Let me answer Arlene first. Why is the gap? The gap. You look in many societies, many countries. One of the biggest determinants is inheritance. Inheritance perpetuates inequality. Some society try to normalize that, which means how you succeed in life should not depend what your parents give you, but your effort, your hard work, right? And how they equalize that is through inheritance tax, right? But here we had inheritance tax until 1992, I think. Then we cancel it. America still has inheritance tax. Korea has inheritance tax. Many countries has inheritance tax. That's one. Number two, we look at the income of the rich. It's not mainly from salary. It's also from interest income, dividend income, financial assets, right? The savings rate of the rich people, usually they spend more. Their spending on expenditure is less compared to middle class or to the poor. So the income from capital gains, from property, for instance, buy and sell shares, what's the tax rate that you have to pay? If you buy and sell shares in Malaysia, it's 0. If you flip property, buy and sell property after 5 years, what is the tax rate that you pay? It's 0. But if you're a worker, you make 100 grand, for instance, or even you make 50 grand, most probably you pay top marginal tax rate of 26-25%. If you make 100,000 a year, you pay 26%. If you buy and sell shares 100,000 a year, you pay 0.
But to justify why the government do not encourage capital gains tax is because our investment climate is still not as encouraging as probably other countries. So it's probably not worth it to make money out of investors.
That's what people like to say. People like to quote. You look at America, the stock market is still booming. They still charge capital gain tax. Europe has a booming stock market. They still charge capital gain tax. It depends how you structure it. If you say more than, let's say, 1 year, more study have to be done, more than 1 year, which means you don't tax long-term investment, which you want anyway. If you want short-term, then it's fine. You only tax short-term investment, which you do not want. You don't want speculations. You can tax that. You don't tax long-term. There are many ways you can do it. But just to say that GST, capital gain tax, is detrimental to investment, there's no empirical evidence that prove this statement.
On the other hand, you still believe in affirmative action for the Malays, or in specific for the Bumiputras. And what makes your argument different from Mahathir's rhetoric during his period of trying to promote the idea of Malay dilemma?
I support affirmative action for the Bumi the same way I support affirmative action for the Chinese, for the Indian, for Sabah Sarawak. For women, give you an example. Now, Chinese participation in public sector is very small compared to the share of population, and we want to increase that, right? We want to increase Chinese participation in the public sector. We want to increase Chinese participation in the police, in the army. How are you going to do that? Are you going to say we're just going to focus on bottom 40%? We're just only going to take poor Chinese? We can't. We want to have a policy that caters specifically for the Chinese, which means you need affirmative action policy. You can call it whatever, but it's still a preference that I want to take Chinese. The same, you look at youth unemployment, the highest among the Indians, 24% between the age 15 to about 19. The highest unemployment is among the Indian, youth unemployment among the Indians. If you want to help that group, specific youth unemployment, not overall, just youth, you need specific policy to help them to capture that, regardless they are from the rich or the poor or the middle class, because the identity that you want is Indian. So you need a preference policy for that. You don't have to call it affirmative action, but you know the idea behind it is to help the youth among the Indians. Even for women, we always talk we want women participation, right, to increase in board level and management level to about 30%. Are you gonna say not gonna based on affirmative action based on needs only? You're just gonna take women who are come from a poor background? No, you're gonna take because she's a woman, isn't it? So there are times, and it goes with Malay. Now we see also for Putra study that we did, we show there's discrimination in hiring among local grads for the Bumi, despite having same qualifications or better qualifications.
That was your research with Dr. Huan
Dr. Lee.
Yeah.
So how do you address this? So there's a time when you need race-based, there's a time when you need gender-based, there's a time when you need regional-based. You want to help Sabah and Sarawak now, right? More infrastructure. Are you going to say, I'm just going to help the poor Sabah and Sarawak? No, you're going to help them because there's Sabah and Sarawak.
But why you don't frame it in a need-based policy framework, like what a lot of the politicians are now trying to promote?
Because it's not going to work. I'll give you an example. If you just want to help the woman participation, right? Are you going to say, I'm just going to give to bottom 40% of the women? I'm just going to help poor women? No, you just want women. Full stop. The same way you want Chinese in the public sector. I want Chinese. Full stop. I don't care. You're poor Chinese, middle Chinese, or middle class Chinese, or rich Chinese.
So the problem with needs-based policy is because it focuses more on the social class dimension rather than on the whole group itself. Is that what you mean?
There are times you need need-based. For instance, you want to give scholarship, it should be need-based, based on the poor, bottom 40%, which is fine. So it depends on the issue. It depends on the problem that you want to solve. It complements each other, like Dr. Lee like to say. It complements. It does not replace. There are times that you need need-based. There are times when you need race-based. You cannot say, I'm not going to use race-based. I'm not going to use gender-based. I'm not going to use region-based. Because to me, those who say it, you just need to use need-based. Maybe it's politically more palatable, politically correct, but it's not going to work. It's going to fail. It's not going to solve a problem. We have to be honest. Race is not a dirty word. We make it dirty word. Who says a dirty word? It's not a dirty word.
When it comes to race problem in Malaysia, I believe it's always been an issue, especially among Malay, Indian, and Chinese. And then the common sense that we have among from these races is Chinese is always richer than the other races. And then when it comes to culture and all the other issues that we are facing, it looks like as if Malay has the more privileges than the other races. And of course, when it comes to employment as well, a lot of companies, they do prefer to have a Chinese because of the work ethics, the attitudes, the participation they've shown so far. So this topic definitely gives me the thoughts, but then the race, definitely I agree with Dr. Muhammad. It's not a dirty word for sure. It's just the people how they created
That's
and
true.
then
I mean,
developed.
in Malaysia, like it or not, when it comes to social classes, it seems like certain race has more advantage than the other race, and they have somehow a premium quality to themselves for being born into that particular race.
Of course, that's what we call a statistical discrimination created by this arrow from America. There's many questions in those
You can digest it.
Let me digest it. Okay. More hardworking, more determined, more disciplined, therefore you're better off. And one group is not, it's lazy. Do you know there's a survey done? Kupusami quoted this. The statement was, all Malays are lazy. Majority of Malays say yes. Majority of Chinese say yes. Majority of Indians say yes. Then there's another statement. Chinese are greedy.
Greedy.
Greedy. Majority of Chinese say yes. Majority of Malays say yes. Majority Indians say yes. Then there's another statement. Indians cannot be trusted. Majority of Malays say yes. Majority of Chinese say yes. But only minority of Indians say yes. So that's interesting. So racial stereotypes still happen.
Yeah,
This perpetuate from the colonial policy until today.
of course.
It still happens.
Mm.
And when we did our study with Dr. Lee,
Mm-hmm.
they say, of course, Bumiputra candidates are discriminated because they're lazy. But this is not proven. When what we did, we take CVs, graduate CVs, fresh graduate CVs. We base on quality. If you're CGPA, low CGPA, right?
Mm-hmm.
Split. Comparable candidates, Malay candidate and Chinese candidate, same grade, same qualification, everything is the same. To be called for interview, Malay graduate not going to get it. Despite, even if Malay candidate has a better grades, which means you are more hardworking, you work better, you will not call for interview.
Because of the stereotype and the perception.
There's one study, in fact, I got an email from this girl from LSE, London School of Economics, a Chinese Malaysian. He said, in your study you want to prove is there or is there not racial preference in hiring private sector. The answer is yes. So she want to find out, she did a master's, why is this so? Because we thought, Dr. Lee and myself, we thought the reason is how do you say it? Is reciprocal, because the Malay are preferred in the public sector. So for the Chinese dominated private sector, well, therefore said I'm gonna hire Chinese. It's not true. That's not what she found out. Although sample size quite small, that's not what she find out. She find out companies usually preferred if they have bad experience, for instance, with Universiti Malaya, all candidates from Universiti Malaya they would not take, because there's perceptions of Universiti Malaya based on past experience. Number two, it's not about affirmative action, because we talk about affirmative action. It's about racial stereotypes. If you come from a particular group, despite even if you're special, you're hardworking, you're smart, because you come from the group, therefore you be labeled in that. You assume to have the characteristic of.
So you take the credit from what's already implanted there.
Voila. So you can be a smart Malay, but the perception is Malay lazy. Therefore, you're Malay lazy. You can be smart Indian, but Indian can be trusted. You're going to be considered not trusted. If you're cool Chinese, you can be you're not greedy. They still say you're going to be greedy. Racial stereotype is an issue. This is to me the biggest problem.
So go back to the new economic policy, NEP. Do you think that it only benefit the rich, especially the rich Malay?
Okay. You look at the objective of new economic policy. People tend to forget this. There are two objectives. One, to eradicate poverty. At that time, about 65% of Malaysian population is considered poor. About 70% of those were Malay. That's one. To eradicate poverty regardless of ethnicity or race. Number two, restructuring of society so that no society being identified with certain jobs. Because at the time, majority of Malay are were in rural areas, working in agriculture. Majority of Chinese in urban area work in service sector or in retail. So and the Indians were in the plantation sector. So the government said we need to restructure this. So when you look at objective number one, reduction of poverty, we had amazing results. However you measure it, poverty line at 900, 1,000, 1,000, however you measure it, we had splendid results. That is undeniable.
But what about post 1990? Has it achieved its main objective, or has it actually went beyond just making the masses rich, but also the very rich richer?
Okay, so let me continue. Number one, I think the background is important. Then number two, restructuring of society. Before, you look, Malay graduates from University Malaya, the only university then. In 1970, there's only one Malay graduate in medical degree. The reason is simple. To get into university, you need high school certificate. And high school then mostly in the urban areas. If you're not in the urban areas, you're not gonna get that chance.
And most of Malays were from
in rural. Most of the Indians in the estate, you don't have that facility. After that, the government built a lot of build more universities, access to high school, access to primary school, and you can see a lot of middle class being created from all ethnic groups. If you look at the income growth, which we can measure, income growth of the poor Malay. People say, oh, the rich Malay will get more than the poor. Actually, it's not true, You look at, and the UNEP study confirmed this. Income growth of the bottom 40% of the Malay grew faster than the income growth of the top, the richest Malay. And this is the same for Chinese and Indians. The income growth of the poor Chinese and poor Indian grew faster than the middle class Chinese, Indian or rich Chinese or Indian. So all groups benefit. To say that it's only benefited the rich, especially the rich, Bumi, is not entirely true. What the book is trying to say is that inequality is both a race issue and it's a class issue. The rich doesn't matter where they're from, they're just rich. The same way you look at middlemen. Middlemen doesn't matter, they're Chinese middlemen or Malay middlemen, Indian middlemen, they're middlemen. And middlemen usually they try to, I cannot use the word screw you, but they like to
You already use it.
But then, yeah, we get the sense of it.
The middleman or the rich, it cut across both racial and class, so it's both. But because we always talk about race, then you see, he's rich, he's Malay. We never say he's rich because he's rich. Those who benefit from no tax or capital gains, no tax on property, buy and sell property after 5 years. The tax doesn't say only applicable to Malay. It's applicable to both the rich. If you can afford this, it doesn't matter.
Apparently, from your book, that the Gini coefficient for financial assets is at 0.9.
Yes, very high.
This is crazy because for income inequality, it's just 0.5.
In global studies, inequality in financial assets is always much higher. And if you look, to stress my point, you look at asset inequality among the Bumi, 0.9. You look among the Chinese and the Indian. What's the number? Almost the same. There's, of course, between groups, there's gaps, but within groups, there's also gaps. That's why the book says it's both class and race. And the policy recommendations is universal. It should help others. It should help others, but it should help everybody. Access to education, Equal Opportunity Act. It cuts across everyone.
We will take a short break. When we return, more discussion with Dr. Muhammad. ASEAN Breakfast Call Dialogue, widening your horizons. Hey, this is Arlene.
Hi, this is Gowri.
Hi, this is Grace.
And of course, we are with Dr. Muhammad again, the author of The Colour of Inequality. He shared with us earlier a lot of the issues pertaining inequality in Malaysia. So continuing our discussion, I asked a few questions just now about needs-based, NEP, Gini coefficient and all that. But I just want to focus on just my personal thought on wealth distribution in this country. Why, even with the new economic policy, the distribution hasn't been fair enough or equal enough to the rest of the society?
Okay. First of all, you cannot have an equal society. If you make sure, let's say now, the policy is to make sure if a Chinese has $1, the Malay has $1, the Indian has $1, orang kampung has $1, orang bandar has $1. Inequality, you know how, if you measure by inequality, Gini, you know how much it would drop? By less than 10%. Because the gap is contributed because of within groups. You need to address also within groups, which is to me much more important. Within Chinese, within Indian, within urban rural, within Malay. So it's both. That's number one. Number two, why it has not worked since 1970. Actually, if you look at income, household income, the gap has reduced. Before 1970, for the Chinese compared to Malay, because we like to talk about these two groups, Chinese would have about 214% more. Now it's about 43%. So the gap has reduced. Even you look at number of professionals, it has the number of Malay has increased. So there's huge improvements. But now the issue is new. Before, you do not have a job, got economic growth, you have a job. Now the issue is, if everybody get a job, now there's a new problem. Does everybody has enough for future generations? Enough in terms of shocks. Shocks could be you lose your job or your kids in hospital, emergency shocks. Would there be enough? So you need a second generation policy. It doesn't mean people have no asset and therefore the policy failed, because that was not the objective of the policy. The objective of policy to eradicate society and restructure society, which I think to a certain extent it has worked very well. Maybe people say it is a failure because we always look at 30%. 30% women participation in business. That's a small part. We never talk about the middle class. We never talk about access to education. We never talk of basic infrastructure. We never talk about poverty. These are all good stories. Only one part is not so good. And to me, this is quite challenging also. From 2% from society, the community that's no link to business for quite some time, suddenly you want to increase to 3% within one generation. That's to me, if you get it, you're a magician.
Of course.
It's very difficult. But we tend to look only one part, 30%, and therefore it failed. We never look at the rest. If you slice the policy, what are the instruments, I think to a certain extent, it has worked. In one UNDP report that was released, the forward, it was by Professor Francis Stewart from Oxford. And if you read the forward, this is on the first page. This is about outstanding success, you know. The problem, we never thought the problem was now the issues. Now we never thought about asset, because before nobody has asset because they have no job. So my priority is not to give you asset, to make sure you get a job. So you have income. When you have income, you can save.
But now that people have job, but it's another
so there's
issue.
new challenges.
Yeah.
Same. Before, we don't talk about women participation, right? We want to get women job. Now maybe women wage differences, wage discrimination. We want to talk about that. So there's new challenges that we must address. Before, we want to eradicate poverty. Now poverty almost at 1%. The issue no longer about absolute poverty. It's about relative poverty. So it's new challenges. Not say that he has failed.
But I just want to go back to race for a bit. Because, how do I put this? If we're talking about mentality-wise, I think the perception is that Chinese people tend to be more proactive in the sense that they go for entrepreneurship, starting their own business, as opposed to just waiting for policies to happen. Does that play a factor as well?
Okay. This is also a misconception. People always say that Chinese are mostly in business.
Yes.
Out of 100 Malay, about 75% employees, makan gaji. Out of 100 Chinese, you know what's the number? Self-employed or makan gaji, the same as Malay. That's why, and therefore
But they makan gaji in private sector.
Yes. Even majority of Malay makan gaji in private sector.
I
You look
see.
at the labour force, 13 million, only 1.3 million in public sector, over 10 million in
So it's
private
like
sector.
85%, is it?
No, that's the
Private
distribution
sector?
of lebih kurang lah, about 85%, 5% GLC. Yeah. So 85%, so majority of Chinese, Indian, Malay, whatever you call it, would be in private sector. Even in that community, in Malay, for instance, 2/3 makan gaji. Chinese the same, 2/3. For the Indians, slightly higher. And therefore, when we look at the number of salaries, bottom 50% of Chinese below 2,000, first we think it's not possible if they're businessmen, right? But you look, are they businessmen? No, it's not the same. That's why the issue is both class and race.
Glad that you mentioned private sector, because if majority of the workforce are in private sector, and of course nowadays when we talk about the problems of employees would be the issue of wage. Do you think if the government give an ultimatum to the private sector to increase the wage, it can somehow reduce inequality among society?
Actually, they did give an ultimatum when they imposed minimum wage.
But minimum wage for 900 ringgit, for example, the Alam Flora workers receive, the one that pick our garbage every day, receive 900 ringgit a month, but they can't even get by for 2 weeks with that salary.
I'm not sure how it get by 2 weeks, but I know what you're saying is difficult. Minimum wage is not about giving you a comfortable life. It's about basic standard of living, and they match it along with poverty line. How do you get poverty line? There's two ways: hardcore poverty and normal poverty. Hard poverty, you have nothing to eat, and nothing to eat, not going to McDonald's. It's basic nutrition from Ministry of Health. So if you have this basic, then you consider not poor, and that's how also they calculate with minimum wage, which the government imposed. But now there's to enforce it is an issue, and moving forward, are you going to index it to inflation? So if inflation increase, minimum wage also increase. People tend to think that minimum wage is about productivity. Minimum wage is not about productivity. That's a minimum wage that you pay. Your increment should be based on your productivity. Some people say, I cannot give you minimum wage or increase of wage because you're lazy, which means productivity didn't go up. But if you're a manufacturing worker, if you track it from 1960 until now, productivity and wages continue track each other until about 1990 is widened, which means even though you work hard, you're not going to be paid well.
Please correct me if my understanding of basic wage is wrong, but then by giving out those basic wage like 900 ringgit you mentioned, wouldn't that on the other side, this is very positive movement, I believe. But on the other side, wouldn't that increase the dependency? Wouldn't that create a culture of dependency or corruption, or even increase the racial envy among people?
I don't think so. I never come across studies that shows the linkages between minimum wage and dependency. It's not welfare payment. You have to work to get this 900. It's not like BRIM payment. Bantuan Rakyat Satu Malaysia, cash transfer. It's not. You have to work to get this 900. And we did a study in NEP study to calculate which one has the most impact on the reduction of inequality. Is it minimum wage, BRIM transfer, or ensuring everybody has secondary education?
Oh, okay, education.
Secondary education. We find that minimum wage has the best positive, the highest positive impact to reduce inequality.
That's on the wage side of the discussion.
Okay.
Let's talk about education, because one of your way forward in terms of addressing the issue, besides addressing the issue of wage, is to address the issue of education in Malaysia. Of course, we cannot talk probably the whole education system in Malaysia, but just to focus on one area, meritocracy. A lot of politicians has been using this as part of their campaign. We need more meritocracy in our education system rather than having a quota system between Malay and non-Malays. But you want to have the quota system instead of meritocracy. Why?
When I mentioned there's to be a quota system based on socio-economic background, which means if you're poor, regardless where you're from, you should be given a preference. Now, it doesn't matter you're poor, you're rich, you need to get all A's. then I give consideration based on socio-economic background, which already a penalty to low-income household. Right? Low-income household, we were in Terengganu the other day to do some documentary on fishing community. Spent some time with the fisherman children. Asked him, what do you have for dinner? Nothing. Why? Because we only eat once a day. This is a big town. This is not small town. One day. Go to bed hungry, go to school hungry. And yet what we're saying, it doesn't matter, we don't care, you need to get all A's. Once you get all A's, then we care. Then we give preference to you. Which is wrong, right? You need to give preference to these kids to take into account their socio-economic background. It's not fair. You're going to penalize those Sabah and Sarawak community. You're going to those who are not in urban areas, or even in urban areas, the urban poor, you're going to penalize them. Not everybody. When we talk about equal opportunity, this is not equal opportunity. Everybody is not equal. Once they're in university, then you can say, now you're equal, fight, right? But even they cannot enter the ring, they cannot be at the starting block, because you say you cannot. We just want to say all A's, 9 A's, 10 A's, or whatever. And it's not quota system based on ethnic groups, based on gender, or based on region. It's based on the socio-economic background of the students, and that will capture, like I say, it will capture majority of the Malays, majority of Sabah and Sarawak.
But what mechanism can be used to track down those who are actually needy in that sense?
We know the income of the parents, the education level of the parents. Same like when you ask scholarship, right? They ask all these numbers. Many things can be done, Even you look, even after you enter university, because university is very expensive, the government spend a lot. You look at other countries in Europe, how much you pay for the fees depend on your parents' income. That's a standard fee. If you're poor, maybe you pay about 500 euros. Your parents' income pays slightly higher. Progressive lah. Isn't it better, isn't it?
Some universities in European country free.
Yeah,
already.
Germany is all free. It's all free.
So, another way forward that you mentioned is to create unions. It's funny because we used to have trade unions in Malaysia, but it was somehow not encouraged in certain periods. But why do you think we should bring back unionization of the workers?
So they have better bargaining power, right? So the benefit of the profits of the work that derive from the workers are shared equally. Now you look for every dollar in income produced by the private sector, for instance, how much is given to the worker? It's about 32% compensation of workers. The balance is corporate profits. In Singapore, for every dollar that generated, 40 cents goes to the worker. In America, it's about 60. In Korea, it's higher. In UK, it's a capitalist country, all much higher. We pay our worker peanuts. That's not the one way to mitigate this is through more bargaining power, and one way is union. People say a union would reduce competitiveness. They become lazy. They demand things. The country with one of the most highest union rate in Nordic countries, even Germany. The profit is still there, the productivity is still there, the competitiveness is still there. But we tend to pick and choose. For instance, the airline union, so many of them, they bring the airline down. You use the argument, tak boleh lah, right? It's not representative.
Yeah. For the last question for me, at the end of the day, Malaysia will be part of the ASEAN economic community, which means that we are opening up our trade to other foreign companies to invest, and the same vice versa. Do you think there would be a negative socio-economic impact towards the local community in Malaysia when it comes to inequality?
Okay. It depends, actually. It depends which sector you open. Now we're opening more on low-income jobs, which means anybody wants to work as plantation workers, you can come work here. But not everybody can, let's say, Singaporeans or Thai people or Indonesian people cannot come here and practice as lawyers. So that the professions are protected. Below is not protected. When below is not protected, which means you can employ more, you tend to depress the wage. But above, if it's protected, there's no competition, right? So your wage can be higher. There's no depression of wages at the top. But I don't know. I haven't looked at the impact of ASEAN integration or AAC on inequality. Which country would benefit, which country would not benefit in terms of inequality. So I cannot really answer by looking. If you just open up the workers at the low income plantation sector, you would tend to depress, or at least you won't see much growth because so many supply, right? But if the top you protected, there will be better wage growth there.
I mean, when it comes to inequality, not only in Malaysia, but Indonesia was a huge gap when it comes to rich and poor, and also when it comes to other ASEAN regions.
Singapore.
Singapore is one of them.
China also.
So it'll be very interesting to look at all this after the ASEAN integration is really happening. To all this.
At the end of the day, we hope that there will be a reduction in inequality, perhaps more political will by the government and private sectors. That's all for our show today. Thanks for sharing your view and joining our discussion on inequality.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.